Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
Bright Summit. The impact of the declaration issued by the Game Guild is of course needless to say. Players on other server continents are envious and jealous. Players in Anduin continent went into a frenzy, especially those large game guilds. Bright Summit. The Game Guild was originally at the same level as them. After this mission and this declaration, the number of members has doubled in just a few days, and it has become the strongest on the Anduin continent. Big Game Guild. The influence of legendary occupations and legendary equipment is evident. The most important is Bright Summit. The Game Guild has completed a quest on the Book of the Dead, which means that there are only 3 such opportunities left. Which guild can find the remaining 3 Books of the Dead? Which guild can become the second one? Bright Summit. Rise with the trend. There are only 3 opportunities, and no one wants to miss it. This is still the case when they don't know that the only Book of the Dead is the Death Note. If you know the real situation, I'm afraid they will be even more crazy. Of course, none of this has anything to do with Sumu. How crazy the Game Guild is and how excited the players are things that Sumu expected. After he has done all he has to do, Sumu just has to wait for the results to come. By the way, build a new city of the dead, a new city of the undead, and it is a city of the undead prepared for the players of the undead camp. Naturally, it is not the same as the city of the undead built by Argus. It only needs to build an altar of death. Players are not as satisfied as the undead. First, the altar of death and the dark sky are a must. With the knowledge base of the 6 months that he studied with Argus, it is no longer difficult for Sumu to build an altar of death. Destroyed a city closest to the capital of Caesar, and transformed all its professionals and residents into undead. When the army of the undead, which numbered 4.8 million, arrived in the capital of Caesar, the construction of Sumu began. The task of building the altar of death is only given to Mist. Under the command of this legendary undead boss, countless undead armies traveled between Caesar's imperial capital and the quarry outside the city, mining huge rocks, cutting them into stone bricks of the same size, and stacking them on Caesar's the city center square of the imperial capital. Subsequently, Mist took a dozen epic undead and built these huge stone bricks little by little to form the prototype of the death altar. After all this is done, Sumu then personally took action, putting the death runes and dark runes into the death altar one by one, and then embedded the corresponding magic crystals as the initial energy supply. Finally is the energy core. With the experience of forging the source of darkness, it only took Sumu more than 10 days to forge a weakened version of the source of darkness with legendary quality, which was embedded in the altar of death in the core. Preparations are complete based on the energy core, with the help of magic crystals, and with the death rune and the dark rune as the vein. When Sumu infuses his own death breath and dark breath into the energy core and communicates with the plane of death, a huge crack appeared in the center of the death altar. The endless breath of death and darkness was pulled out from the plane of death by the altar of death, turned into a jet black beam of light that rose into the sky, reached a height of hundreds of meters and then sprinkled down, forming a huge fog shield covering the entire capital of Caesar. Darkness. Although the death altar and the dark sky built by Sumu are not comparable to the city of the dead, it is enough to use it as a main city for the players of the undead camp. The appearance of the dark sky represents that the prototype of the city of the dead has been formed. The next step is to add various functional buildings to the nascent city of the dead. First, the blacksmith shop. The undead line has special forging skills. In hundreds of years of continuous research, Argus had already transformed the master-level blacksmithing technique that he had mastered into the undead forging technique, and also raised it to the master level. Sumu even simpler. He learned from Argus that after the forging of the undead, he directly consumed free points and raised this skill to the master level. Undead blacksmithing is similar to ordinary blacksmithing. It's just that the materials for forging equipment have changed from various ordinary materials to various bones, heads, internal organs, or various materials that originally contain the breath of death or darkness. The equipment forged with the undead forging technique not only contains the breath of death and darkness, but also fits the players of the undead camp to a large extent. Simply put, it is the exclusive equipment for the undead camp players. Sumu has a master-level undead forging technique, but it is impossible for him to end the game himself and forge equipment for players. To solve this problem, he specially ran dozens of cities, plundered more than a dozen senior blacksmiths from the human camp, and directly transformed them into bone blacksmiths with the information recorded in the skeleton notebook. Even their forging techniques were transformed into undead forging techniques on the premise that Sumu did not hesitate to spend a lot of death and darkness aura to the end. 3 master-level bone blacksmiths and 12 senior bone blacksmiths appeared in this city of the dead. A master-level skeleton blacksmith can forge epic equipment, or even legendary equipment on the premise of having the corresponding quality materials, but the probability of failure is extremely high. Even a high-level skeleton blacksmith is enough to forge dark gold quality and gold quality equipment. 3 master-level skeleton blacksmiths and 12 senior skeleton blacksmiths, distributed in all directions of the city of the undead, are enough to meet the needs of the undead camp players. After all, they are only responsible for forging, and the materials need to be obtained by players themselves. After all, the premise of letting the skeletons forge equipment is that players have accumulated a certain degree of contribution in the undead camp. No money, no experience, only need to consume the faction contribution, and only need to prepare the corresponding materials. You can let the bone blacksmith create a piece of equipment for you. This temptation for the undead camp players should be big enough. Next is the tailor shop. The same as above, with the omnipotent Argus, the omnipotent free points, and the friendly assistance of the human world. It also took little time for 2 master-level corpse tailors and 15 senior corpse tailors appeared in every corner of the city of the dead. Finally, there's the place to live. This work, Sumu directly handed over to Carola to complete. This Princess Mononoke has grown up. This growth does not refer to strength, but to mind, wisdom and understanding of the whole world. When Mist was in charge of building the Altar of Death, the Ghost Princess drove an army of more than 100,000 undead to repair and transform the buildings in Caesar's capital little by little. By the time Sumu completed the transformation of the skeleton blacksmith and the corpse tailor, Carola had basically completed the repair and transformation of various buildings in Caesar's capital. After the transformation of the natural Princess Mononoke, the architectural style of Caesar's capital has changed greatly. The style of the city gates, city walls, streets, and buildings has changed from the martial style of the Caesar Empire to the gloomy and ferocious style of the undead. Even the original royal castle, after getting Sumu off the ice, Carola reinvented it. The body of Caesar VII was still frozen, and was sunk by Sumu into the ice coffin, specially prepared for him under the castle. The entire royal castle was also transformed into an undead castle by Carola. With that insignificant memory, Carola transformed this place into her own home, and also into the home of Sumu and Agnes. In the heart of Princess Mononoke, Sumu and Agnes are her only family members. Of course, not just the castle of the dead. When the interest in architecture was aroused, Carola also drove the army of more than 100,000 undead to build a huge performance field next to the castle of the undead for the Death Knights to fight. Built a row of barracks next to the performance field, rest for the Death Knights. Agnes naturally lived with her and Sumu in the castle of the undead. Not far from the undead castle, Carola also built a huge mage tower for Argus and a bold and rough dragon cave hall for Nefarian. All in all, in addition to not embedding the corresponding runes, not laying out the corresponding magic circle, Carola, who has nowhere to release her energy, has achieved the ultimate in Caesar's capital. Almost moved the city of the dead in the mountains to the capital of Caesar. For Sumu, it's a job. It was for the convenience of the undead camp players, and to improve the cohesion of the undead camp players, he gave some camp benefits. For Carola, it's a game. Carola finds great joy in building and changing a huge city at will. Even her mind and consciousness were completely perfected in the process. After all this was over, the new city of the dead was born. There are blacksmith shops, tailor shops, residences, and trading and selling places. Even NPC_Sumu is ready for players, that is, the epic undead under the command of dozens of Mist. In addition to the grocery store, that does not sell blood medicine, potions and other undead camp players that can't be used. The most lacking thing in this new city of the undead is the skill tutor, but the skill library is a weapon for Sumu to harvest player experience. Naturally, it will not be open so early. He is waiting. Wait for the players to find the last death note. Wait for him to get the career template of the Scourge Knight, and wait until he fuses his own legendary career template and step into the legendary rank. At that time, it was time for him to open up his skill library and harvest player experience. The reason, just like what he did in the City of the Dead, advanced level, and then use the nearly endless breath of death and darkness in the jet black light column to improve your level and strength, so that your strength will skyrocket after the advanced level, reaching the peak. The last time the strength skyrocketed, so that Suma's strength reached the peak of Anduin continent. The next power surge, Sumu will surpass this prime material world. All preparations are done, giving Agnes an order to bring the Death Knights and Nefarian to the capital of Caesar. Sumu opened his attribute panel. Based on the task editing system, Sumu quickly edited an announcement, quietly adjusted the camp contribution of the undead camp to 500,000. Sumu thought and released this announcement. Next moment, the crisp system prompt sounded in the minds of all undead camp players. Humph. In view of the fact that the main mission of the camp, the rise of the undead family, the total contribution has reached 500,000. The leader of the undead camp, the King of Bones, Su-mu, is ready to open the City of the Dead, the City of Bones in advance. All players of the undead camp can enter the City of Bones through teleportation scrolls, teleportation arrays, or other means. Teleportation scroll. Although the city's name has changed from Caesar's capital to the City of Bones, its spatial coordinates have not changed. Players who originally purchased the teleportation scroll of the capital of Caesar can still enter the city through the teleportation scroll. Teleportation array. In the entire Anduin continent, there are dozens of cities destroyed or polluted by Su-mu. In these cities, he only transformed the professionals and residents into undead, and transformed the players into the undead camp players, but the city itself was not destroyed. Through the teleportation arrays of these cities, players can still enter the City of Bones. It's up to the players to show their abilities. Those with teleportation spells use teleportation spells, those with flying mounts use flying mounts, and those who have nothing can only rely on their own legs. Announcement issued. It sounded in the minds of all players of the undead camp. Suddenly there was an uproar. The first reaction of many undead camp players is to open their own attribute panel and check the contribution of the undead camp. That's right, the total contribution of the entire undead camp has only reached 500,000. So how did the City of the Undead open? The main City of the Undead cannot be opened until the faction main quest reaches the third stage, and the total number of faction contribution points reaches 100 million. Why now? Spray right. One is the City of the Dead, and the other is the main City of the Dead. Anyway, the opening of the City of the Undead is definitely good news for players of the Undead camp, although, due to the terrifying deterrent force brought by the King of Bones, most of the polluted cities are not willing to approach, and even the countries that those cities originally belonged to are reluctant to send troops to subdue them. But after all, there are still many heroes who will go to crusade these undead cities. Again, there is nothing in these undead cities except the undead wandering aimlessly. Even the players from the undead camp have no sense of belonging to these cities full of undead. On the surface, the players of the undead camp are very imposing. On the top, there is the King of Bones, Su-mu, as a deterrent, which makes many human kingdoms and heroes dare not to encircle and suppress them on a large scale. But, after all, the monster camp has the drawbacks of the monster camp. Not having the right equipment is one of them. Even if they produced equipment during the leveling process, most of the equipment was not suitable for them, and could only be thrown away or resold on the forum. No more skills. This is number 2. These 2 professional templates created by Su-mu are comprehensive, but that is only on the premise that the player is promoted to the Lord rank. Under the Lord rank, whether it is a zombie professional player, or a corpse witch professional player, there are many restrictions. There is no city of its own, which is the third, or, this is the most important one. Without a city that truly belongs to the undead camp players, the more than 500,000 undead camp players on the entire Anduin continent have no ownership, just like a piece of loose sand. At this stage, all players are still obsessed with the main quests released by Su-mu, and they can't feel it for the time being. Wait until the main quest is over. The mere 500,000 undead camp players, who cannot unite together, I am afraid they will soon be wiped out by the human camp players. So, when the City of Bones, which was built by Su-mu, and can be called the official main city of the undead camp, opened, countless players of the undead camp were excited. Immediately, a large number of players flocked to prepare to go to the City of Bones. Naturally, some players have the teleportation scroll of the City of Bones, or they are in a City of the Dead that can lead to the City of Bones. City of Bones, the edge of the altar of death. The teleportation array originally belonged to the Caesar Empire. Quietly, this teleportation formation, which had been silent for nearly a year, began to emit a soft glow. After a slight magic fluctuation, several figures emerged from the huge teleportation formation that could accommodate hundreds of people at the same time. 5 figures, 2 corpses, 3 zombies. All are players of the undead camp. The player at the head is a zombie leader, who has stepped into the warrior rank. This is the City of Bones. Starlight, this is the name of this zombie commander. As early as the decisive battle in the capital of Caesar, the Star Lamp once came to the capital of Caesar with his partners, and joined the crusade against the King of Bones. Now, hometown revisit. This huge city is no longer what it used to be. Walking out of the teleportation array, the first thing that caught their eyes was the huge death altar that occupied the entire city center square. The pitch-black beam of light shot straight into the sky, and after reaching a height of several hundred meters, it fell down again, turning into a shield made of black mist, enclosing the entire city. Under the shroud of darkness, a faint smoke floated in the entire City of Bones. The smoke was not enough to block their sight, but it made them feel extremely comfortable, as if this is the environment they should live in. Open your own attribute panel, and the star lamp is surprised to find that there are 2 more buffs on his body. The first buff, energetic, as long as it is within the range shrouded in the dark sky, the consumption of his skills to release is reduced by a full 10%. The second buff, dark domain, bathed in the dark sky for a long time, his experience value and attribute value will increase to varying degrees. According to the growth rate of about a month, he can get the growth of all 4-dimensional attributes +5. As expected of a City of Bones, this is where the players of the undead camp should stay. Unlimited surprise in my heart, Starlight looked in other directions. Just a glance, he couldn't help shrinking his head. At this time, he discovered that there were 2 extremely tall figures standing outside the teleportation formation. These 2 tall figures are all over 2 meters 5. He was wearing worn-out armor, and through the gaps between the armors, he could vaguely see the flesh and sturdy bones that could dry inside. 2 figures, one holding a big sword, the other holding a big sword. Judging from the breath they exude, they are all undead bosses of epic ranks. These 2 epic undead were naturally one of those epic undead under mist. As one of the undeads transformed by mist from the corpses of barbarian patriarchs, these epic undeads have limited potential and are difficult to perform difficult tasks, but as NPC guards guarding the City of Bones, they are still qualified. Barbarians do not have a pure caster profession. All these epic undead are based on physical attacks, and then add frost damage. With their rank and strength, an epic undead can easily suppress thousands of players from the undead camp. It is suitable for guarding the City of Bones, not just teleportation arrays. At the 4 gates of the City of Bones, the entrance to the castle of the undead, the entrance to the martial arts arena, the entrance to the mage tower, and even the entrance to the dragon cave hall, there are all such epic undead guards. 0. Ask for flowers. The rest of the epic undead are constantly patrolling all over the City of Bones, with teams of undead who are at least elite rank. Dozens of epic undead, plus thousands of undead who are constantly patrolling the City of Bones, at least all of the elite ranks, have brought a breath of life to this dead City of Bones. At the same time, it also brings a huge sense of security to the players of the undead camp. In the game world, there is no absolute safe zone. Even in the various king cities of the human kingdom, players can make unscrupulous shots, as long as they can withstand the wanted and hunted down of the king city professionals afterwards. And Sumu, in this way, the City of Bones will be made into an absolute safe zone. Dozens of undead in epic rank, plus thousands of undead in lord rank, plus tens of thousands of undead in warrior rank, or elite rank. Under the suppression of this force, whoever dares to make trouble in the City of Bones will surely die. After carefully walking past the 2 epic undead, making sure that the long sword with the flickering broadsword was not on him, the star lamp quickly took his companions away. It wasn't until he got away from the altar of death and the teleportation array that the starry sky lamp let out a long sigh. What the hell? I'm scared to death. Yes, the 2 undead bosses have been staring at us, and the big sword and the long sword seem to be cut off at any time. The undead boss of the epic rank should be the guard, and he is indeed the King of Bones, with a card face. The other 4 players also had lingering fears. After some complaints, the Starlight opened its own system map. After all, it is the player. Even if they join the undead camp, the small map that comes with the system is still there. Then, he saw the icons marked on the minimap: Undead Castle, Dark Mage Tower, Death Arena, Dragon Cave Hall, Death Altar, Teleportation Array, Blacksmith Shop, Tailor Shop. Go to the blacksmith shop. From the small map, they found a blacksmith shop that was closest to their location, and Star Lantern couldn't wait to rush towards the blacksmith shop with a few of his companions. Soon, they arrived at the blacksmith shop. The style of the blacksmith shop is consistent with the entire City of Bones. Gloomy, hideous. There is also a huge skull hanging on the wall. At this moment, a skeleton blacksmith who was shirtless, with dry black flesh and thick bones exposed in the air, was brandishing a hammer to forge a piece of equipment. Several players appear. The blacksmith just glanced here, and the slight soul fluctuation spread. What do you want? See for yourself. Next moment, a panel appeared in the field of view of the starlights. It's not buying panels, it's forging panels. That is to say, the blacksmiths in this smithy do not sell equipment, but only forge equipment for players. And the conditions and grades of forging equipment: 10 contribution points plus corresponding materials to forge a piece of bronze equipment, 100 contribution points plus corresponding materials to forge a piece of silver equipment, 1000 contribution points plus corresponding materials to forge a piece of golden equipment, 10,000 contribution points plus corresponding materials to forge a piece of dark gold equipment, 100,000 contribution points plus corresponding materials Forge an epic equipment. Even legendary equipment can be forged. The starlights are amazing. The contribution points of the undead faction players and the contribution of the faction main quest are not the same concept. When a player joins the undead camp, his attribute panel will naturally have a column of contribution points. Normal fighting monster upgrades will not generate contribution points, but when a faction crusades the undead camp and is blocked by the undead camp players, it will generate contribution points. In short, things that are beneficial to the development and growth of the undead camp will generate contribution points. With the rules of the game as supervision, there is no possibility of cheating. Of course, the fastest way to get contribution points is through quests. For example, the two main quests released by Sumu, such as other quests released by senior NPCs of the undead camp such as Kerala and Agnes, etc. Completing these tasks will naturally get a lot of contribution points, while the camp contribution, it's just a bunch of data that Sumu can adjust by itself. In a sense, the contribution degree is a tool for Sumu to master the development speed of the undead camp, and the contribution point is a currency issued by him in the undead camp. When looking at the forging list, Starlight was shocked. His companions were also startled. From bronze gear to legendary gear, this skeleton blacksmith can forge it all. Needs: just contribute points and materials that correspond to 483 and all these forged equipment can be used by undead professional players, whether it's weapons or armor. For example, a piece of equipment that Star Lantern fancy, the bloodthirsty claws of dark gold quality, can be equipped on the weapon bar and used in combination with his own zombie claws. Equipped with this weapon, he not only increases his attack power, but also continuously absorbs the enemy's health to restore his own health when attacking the enemy. Just need a full 10,000 contribution points and all the materials for forging bloodthirsty claws. Contribution points, okay to say, this is tradable. A few people gathered together and then went to the forum to find other players from the undead camp to buy some, and they could always get it together. But the material: 1 lord level undead claw, 1 pound of black beard, 2 bloodthirsty flowers, and 1 magic crystal. Silently recited the materials needed to forge the bloodthirsty claws, and the star lamp found that it seemed that he had never heard of a single material. Fortunately, the materials required for gold equipment, silver equipment and bronze equipment are more common, especially bronze equipment. The materials needed to forge a bronze level claws were all that he had seen before or had seen in the trading house. Bronze level equipment doesn't improve him much for a time. Star Lantern and his partners were caught in a tangle, but no matter how tangled, their hearts are still very excited. Nothing else. Players of the human camp have experienced how difficult it is to obtain a good piece of equipment, and now, as long as the contribution points are enough, as long as the corresponding materials are prepared, it is legendary equipment, and they can also create it. It can be said, from this moment on, equipment is no longer a disadvantage for players of the undead camp. Star Lantern is only the first player to enter the City of Bones, not the only one. As time goes by, more and more players from the undead camp appeared in this city, and all the arrangements of Sumu in this City of Bones were also known by more and more players, such as a blacksmith shop, such as a tailor shop. For example, under the suggestion of Sumu, Kerala, Mist, and even Epic Undead, Bone Blacksmith, Corpse Tailor, etc., began to issue quests to these undead camp players. Although it is still rudimentary, the functions of the City of Bones are constantly being improved. When Sumu transformed the corpse of an epic hero mage into a lich, the first grocery store in the City of Bones appeared. Players of the undead camp paid certain materials to customize the exclusive teleportation scroll of the City of Bones. Its price is much lower than other teleportation scrolls. Of course, contribution is settled. When Agnes returns with the Death Knights, the Arena of Death opens. Players pay a certain amount of contribution and can enter the Death Arena to watch the battle between Death Knights, or challenge Death Knights, or challenge other players. When Nefarian's huge figure appeared in the Dragon Cave Hall, a new epic quest appeared. As long as players can find clues and locations of other legendary dragons on the Anduin continent, they can get a dragon scale bestowed by Nefarian, and this dragon scale is enough to create epic equipment, etc. Unconsciously, the City of Bones prospered. Every day, at least 100,000 undead camp players stop in this undead city, either forge equipment, or accept quests, or simply settle in this City of Bones. In order to meet the needs of players to buy a house, Sumu even specially transformed a lich to be responsible for selling real estate to players. The more luxurious the property, the more contribution points are required. Even some luxurious mansions that originally belonged to the great merchants, great nobles, and princes and ministers in the capital of Caesar's capital required the player's rank to enter the lord rank before they were eligible to purchase blacksmith shop, tailor shop, grocery store, task trade, real estate, etc. When all this appeared in the City of Bones, the city of the undead had completely become the center of the more than 500,000 undead camp players, and the sense of belonging was overwhelming if Sumu and a group of high-level undead NPCs disappeared. And if a human kingdom came to attack the City of Bones, I'm afraid Sumu would not need to issue a quest, and the players of the more than 500,000 undead camp would do their best to protect the main city of their camp. By this time, the follow-up development of the City of Bones basically does not need Sumu to intervene. When Argus couldn't help but run out of the City of the Dead and settled in the City of Bones, Sumu became a complete hands-off shopkeeper. Without him, Argus does love research, but research also needs materials. When he was in the City of the Undead, all his materials were consumed and he went out to find them all by himself. But what about in the City of Bones? Just by issuing a quest and just a few small rewards, there are hundreds of thousands of players all over the world. Help him find the quest. This convenience, how could Argus refuse? However, no need for slavery. The Lich King, whom Sumu highly valued, joined the undead camp in this way, and was tied to his chariot by Sumu. Next, Argus became the lord of the City of Bones. Whether it is to make new plans for the City of Bones, or to cultivate new undead to improve the functional buildings in the City of Bones, the Lich King, who has existed for hundreds of years and has mastered countless knowledge and skills, has far surpassed Sumu. No need for him to worry. The City of Bones is on the right track. Sumu also has a lot of free time to continue to improve his strength. City of Bones, Undead Castle, sitting on the throne that originally belonged to Caesar VII, but now belongs to him. Sumu opened his own attribute panel. Another few months have passed since getting the skull note. Players on Anduin continent are still working hard, but they are not as crazy as they were at the beginning really. The rewards given by Sumu were extremely generous. Even the large game guilds coveted them, but relatively, whether it is the clues of the Death Note or the clues of the legendary undead, it is far beyond the reach of players. At the current stage, human enthusiasm is limited. Over time, it will naturally fade. They will still pay attention, and will still work hard to find clues about the Book of the Undead and the legendary undead, but they will no longer devote all their time and energy to this aspect as they did at the beginning. But Sumu didn't come out of nowhere either. At this time 2 more quest clues had appeared on his quest panel. These 2 clues, one points to the Skrak Canyon in the east of the Caesar Empire, and the other points to a small duchy in the south of the Anduin continent, the Duchy of Sar. The first one, Tiankrak Canyon. According to the information collected and submitted by players, this is a naturally formed canyon. Even during the decisive battle in the capital of Caesar, as well as when the Caesar Empire was in civil strife and foreign enemies invaded, a legendary hero who guarded outside the Tiankrak Canyon did not leave Seam. Guarding that canyon is more important than the survival of the entire Caesar Empire. Unknown is suppressed in the Sky Crack Canyon. This is what Sumu got. As for what was suppressed, let alone players, even Sumu personally took action and read the memories of several epic heroes, but he did not get the slightest information. The only thing that is certain is that if you let the unknown in the Sky Crack Canyon come out, it will cause a catastrophe no less than the undead natural disaster. Mission systems have the benefits of mission systems. Player-made clues cannot be submitted, regardless of whether the information submitted by the players is what Sumu needs. After the calculation of the game rules, it is indeed possible that Sumu needs it before it can be submitted to Sumu by the players. The final determination of clues and the distribution of rewards will also be carried out after Sumu has verified the authenticity of the clues. So, since the relevant information of this Skrak Canyon appeared on the task panel, it means that there may really be information that Sumu needs in this suppressed canyon. Article 2, the Duchy of Sar. According to the information collected by the players, this small principality located in the south of the Anduin continent is the only human country in the entire Anduin continent that remains neutral and has not been dragged into the war. To know, at a time when all countries are not required to participate in the war and have to stand in line, it is not normal for a small human principality to remain neutral while surrounded by wolves, and a player has never been born in the Principality of Thrall, nor has a player actually entered the territory of the Principality of Thrall. This is an extremely closed country. Never contact with the outside world, let alone deal with the outside world. It does not allow its own nationals to leave its own territory, and it also refuses to allow people from other countries to enter its own territory. Such a small principality no one has invaded. Not only that, after discovering the strangeness of the Principality of Sar, a warrior rank assassin once tried to infiltrate the small principality, but every time he has not waited for him to officially enter the city of this small principality, he is quickly discovered and killed. This was the case several times in a row. Seeing that he was about to fall from the warrior rank, he could only give up, but in the closest perception to the city of the Principality of Sar, the assassin had clearly felt that a very strong dark aura was entrenched in the city. In this way, the assassin contacted the players of the undead camp and submitted this abnormality as a clue. Whether it's true or not, as long as you can submit, there is a possibility of getting rewards. Now that he got the clue, Sumu naturally wanted to check it out. This crack canyon is located in the east of the Caesar Empire, and it needs to cross the Caesar Empire that is basically stabilized. The Principality of Sar is located in the southern part of the Anduin continent, which basically needs to span half of the Anduin continent. Crack Canyon is closer. Suma's first choice is naturally Tianchai Canyon, and he also wants to see what kind of existence is sealed in this canyon that can be called unknown. It can be called more. Once it is released, it will cause a terrifying disaster, no less than the undead natural disaster. Subsequently, Sumu summoned Nefarian. A few minutes later, the undead camp players in the entire city of Bones saw a huge ghost dragon rising into the sky and disappeared in the east of the city of Bones. Across the Caesar Empire, it will take a long time. Hurry up and hurry up. In the case of cooperating with the phase shift, it took 4 or 5 days for Sumu and Nefarian to cross over half of Caesar's empire and appear in the vast mountains. According to the information submitted on the task panel, this crack canyon is distributed in this mountain range. Abandon the use of phase shift. Sumu sat on Nefarian's huge skull dragon head and quickly rushed towards the coordinates marked in the clue. At this time, Nefarian had completely adapted to the identity of Suma's mount like Argus, before being enslaved by the eroded talent. This ghost dragon was tied to Suma's chariot and became a member of the undead camp. He opened the mountain's retreat. The huge body cast a shadow on the ground. Nefarian quickly approached Crack Canyon 01, Tiancha Canyon, located in the mountains. When this canyon was discovered and the ominous objects in the canyon were discovered, the Caesar Empire spent a lot of manpower, material, and financial resources, and it took more than 10 years to build a fortress. Skybreak Fortress. Unlike ordinary fortresses, the Sky Crack Fortress is a fortress built around the canyon after leveling the canyon. Looking down from the sky, this crack fortress is like a huge city wall, which firmly surrounds this crack canyon. No one is allowed to enter, neither is allowed to exist in any of them, not just city walls. In the long and narrow Sky Crack Fortress, there is a mage tower every other distance. Every moment, these mage towers are releasing soft rays of light, constantly injecting magic power into each rune, forming a huge cobweb-like array of runes, covering the entire sky-cracking canyon. These rune arrays include defensive rune arrays, offensive rune arrays, and more auxiliary rune arrays. Sleep, imprison, seal, bondage. Almost all types of rune arrays can be found in this rune array. Tiancha Canyon is several kilometers long and more than 200 meters wide. To maintain such a rune array that completely covers the Sky Crack Canyon, not to mention how many spellcasters are needed, the daily consumption of magic crystals alone is an astronomical number. Perhaps only the Caesar Empire, the former continental hegemon, can support this consumption. The supreme leader of Skyrif's stronghold is a legendary hero, but this legendary hero is different from other legendary heroes. In terms of combat power, this legendary hero may not even be comparable to an epic hero, but in terms of defense, this legendary hero is enough to fight against more than 10 legendary heroes, because his occupation is a legendary occupation, a space enchanter. A space enchantment master can not only release all kinds of defensive enchantments with extremely powerful defenses, but is also familiar with various seal runes and seal circles. If the time is enough, he can even release the forbidden spell, making the space within a large area freeze. Therefore, this legendary hero became the supreme master of Skysplit Fortress because, suppressing the unknown in this crack canyon, what is needed is not an attack, but a seal in defense. If the rune array that seals the Sky Crack Canyon fails, in the entire Caesar Empire, only this space enchanter can release the space to freeze. Instead of the rune array to seal the unknown in the canyon at this time, Ellen usually appear on the walls of the fortress, checking the operation of the wizard tower and rune column with the many epic spellcasters under his command. 2 hours in a row. After all the inspections were over, Eiffel let out a long sigh of relief. Adjutant, how long can our magic crystal last? Beside Eiffel, an epic spellcaster hurriedly said, Sir, it can last for about 10 days. 10 days, not enough. In the event of an accident, it will be too late to send the magic crystal. Frowning his brows, Eiffel said, Contact His Majesty the Emperor, and ask His Majesty to find a way to send another batch of magic crystals as soon as possible. If possible, let our magic crystal reserves last for a month as much as possible. Sir, we were contacted an hour ago. The epic spellcaster replied, Your Majesty has prepared enough magic crystals for us to use for 2 months this time, and it should be delivered soon. However, Your Majesty asked, Sir, you can provide him with 10 more space crystals. Again, Eiffel was a little displeased. The so-called space crystal is a crystal inscribed with space spells. With Eiffel's ability, it is enough to engrave an ultra-miniature space freezing forbidden spell into the magic crystal, and release it when needed. Whether it is used to defend or imprison the enemy, it has miraculous effects only. Every time a space crystal is made, Eiffel needs to consume a lot of time and energy. This consumption is very likely to make him make mistakes in maintaining the Mage Tower and Rune Array. Heavenly Crack Canyon cannot afford to lose. Even the survival of the Empire and the replacement of the throne are not as important in Eiffel's eyes as the seal of this Crack Canyon, because this is not just his oath, it is the order of the Emperor Caesar VII, who he has been loyal to all his life. Even if the Emperor has fallen, $10 is too much. Eiffel took a moment and said, 5. After a month, I will take out 5 space crystals and give it to the Majesty. Just reply like this. The adjutant did not argue, and truthfully passed Eiffel's answer to the young emperor. Same as Eiffel, all spellcasters who choose to station here know what a terrifying existence they suppress and seal. It is also derived from the order of Caesar VII, and his own sense of mission, so that these spellcasters who instinctively enjoy glory and wealth stay here, maintaining the operation of the Mage Tower and the Rune Array day after year. Inspection completed, Eiffel was ready to return to his residence to create space crystals for His Majesty the Emperor. At this time, he suddenly felt something wrong. He looked into the distance and saw a small black spot in the high sky in the distance. As time goes by, the black spots are rapidly getting bigger. When he was only a few kilometers away from the sky-split fortress, Eiffel finally saw what it was. Ghost Dragon, a huge ghost dragon with a wingspan of nearly 100 meters. There is a black figure in black armor, and a black basket sitting on the skeleton dragon head of this ghost dragon. Nefarian, the King of Bones. The tired expression on his face was instantly replaced by shock and panic, and Eiffel shouted, Adjutant, quickly send a message and ask Your Majesty for help. The King of Bones is here. The others wait. Fight with me. Is this Crack Canyon? Sitting on Nefarian's head and looking down from a distance, Sumu saw the winding and majestic sky-split fortress, the Mage Tower standing in the fortress, and the soft light emitting from it, the Rune Array that covers the entire Sky Crack Canyon like a spider web. This protective measure, Sumu believed, the human, material and financial resources needed to build all of this are enough to bring down a second-class human kingdom. The Caesar Empire consumed such a huge amount of energy and built a fortress to guard the Tianxia Canyon. It should not be aimless. He believed that there was indeed a repression of ominous things in this canyon, but don't believe. The suppressed hoodoo can be compared to the scourge of the undead, especially the undead catastrophe he unleashed. The panic and preparations of the Imperial Guards and spellcasters in the sky-split fortress were naturally noticed by Sumu, but he ignored it. A legendary mage, dozens of epic mages, add to that a huge army of spellcasters and Imperial Guards, 483. This power, in the eyes of today's Sumu, that's it. It won't take long for him to kill them all, but he didn't mean to do anything, and he didn't mean to destroy the Rune Array. Instead, he wrapped Nefarian with his own breath in the sky, and directly started the phase shift. Ignoring the guardians in this crack fortress, I passed through the running Rune Array, and entered this crack canyon directly. If the unknown in this crack canyon really exceeds his response range, the Rune Array and many guardians still have their role in the fortress. When the figures of Sumu and Nefarian suddenly disappeared, Eiffel felt choked, left, still, unable to help. His eyes passed through the Rune Array, and looked towards the canyon vaguely. He seemed to see a huge black shadow passing by in a flash. The King of Bones took the ghost dragon into this crack canyon. When this thought emerged from his mind, Eiffel's mood was extraordinarily complicated. The King of Bones is the current natural disaster. The unknown in the canyon is a natural disaster in the future. Now, the King of Bones took the ghost dragon into the Sky Crack Canyon, and faced the ominous thing sealed inside that he couldn't even imagine. With his knowledge of the King of Bones and the hoodoo, there are only 2 outcomes. 1. The King of Bones was swallowed by the ominous thing, and disappeared. The other, the ominous thing was killed by the King of Bones, and their mission was completed. 10. No matter what kind of result is good news for them, but also for the entire continent. Uneasy in my heart, the spells that had already begun to guide gradually dissipated. Eiffel stared motionless as he fell back into the calm Chatter Canyon. Actually, there is a third possibility, but the Guardian dared not imagine, because that possible appearance means that their guardianship has no meaning. Anduin continent has no future. A phase shift spanning a distance of thousands of meters also passed through the cobweb-like rune array. Su-mu took Nefarian directly to the depths of this crack canyon. He felt a slight dizziness. Not only is the sky above the sky crack canyon covered with a large net, but even the interior of the canyon is engraved with countless rune formations, valley bottom mountain wall boulders. The place that could almost accommodate the rune formation was all engraved with runes, which continued to the depths of the canyon, a dark cave. The breath of death flows, except for the dizziness. Su-mu took Nefarian to start the phase shift again, crossed this long canyon, and entered the cave. The entrance to the cave is not large, just enough for Nefarian to barely pass. But after entering the cave, an extremely wide space appeared in front of Su-mu. There is no light source in the cave, but with Su-mu's current strength, he can see everything around him in the dark. This mountainside is extremely broad. I'm afraid there are thousands of squares, not just width, but depth, and in this huge mountain like a square, there are many passages leading to other places. His eyes glanced over the entire mountain, and Su-mu's pupils flashed with a faint blue shattering flame, and his pupils were slightly suspicious. He saw the details. In every inch of space, on the edge of the mountain, there are countless tiny gaps, as if they were sprayed out by countless tiny teeth. Not only that, on the rocks on the side of the mountain, in the mouth of the mountain wall, at the bottom of the cave, and even under their feet, there are white bugs only the size of mung bean, as if the countless tiny gaps are all spewed out by these insects' mouths. These bugs, is it just unknown? Looking around from top to bottom, Su-mu said silently in his heart. Su-mu was observing this huge cave, and Nefarian was also observing this area. Its body is huge and heavy, even standing still. The weight of the body alone crushed a hollowed-out rock. Yesterday, the crisp sound of rock breaking sounded. It echoed in this empty cave. In this originally dead silent cave, the crisp sound and the echoes that followed were particularly harsh. Next moment, there are new voices in this cave. Like countless flying insects flapping their wings. The sound was very small at first, inaudible, and then became louder and louder, almost to the deafening level. Do not it seems. That is the sound of countless flying insects flapping their wings. Under Su-mu's gaze, the bone-white worms he had seen before seemed to have just woken up from a deep slumber, spread out their bone-white wings, and flew towards him and Nefarian. Just one or two bone-white bugs. Su-mu wouldn't care. But what when this bony worm counts in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions? Under their feet, around them, in the sky above them, and even in the ground, rock walls and many openings of the vast cave, they have not yet stepped on. There are countless tiny bone-white flying insects flying out and rushing towards this side. Come, Su-mu's scalp felt numb. In the more than 10 years of his gaming career in the past and present, he had never seen such a penetrating scene. He can feel. These bone-white flying insects are very weak, so weak that he can ignore them directly. But there are so many of these flying insects, it's just his stupefying effort. The entire cave was filled with an incalculable number of bone-white flying insects. They are like white mist, like rushing river water, rushing towards Su-mu and Nefarian in groups, aggressive, and very fast. In almost a few breaths, the figures of Su-mu and Nefarian were completely submerged by the overwhelming bone-white flying insects. Well, cha-cha, cha-cha-cha-cha. Countless small voices resounded densely. Although the body is only the size of a mung bean, after these bone-white flying insects landed on Su-mu and Nefarian, they opened their sharp fangs, that were half their bodies, and began to gnaw at their bodies. Of course, whether it was Su-mu or Nefarian, their bodies were as hard as legendary equipment, and naturally they were not something that these weak, bone-white flying insects could devour. The result of the desperate gnawing is basically that the claws of these bone-white flying insects are broken, but countless bone-white flying insects attacked, covering them like flowing water, and drilling into the inside of their bodies through every inch of their body surface. This feeling is not something that anyone can stand. Su-mu was fine, but a shiver in his heart. Nefarian roared directly and rose into the sky in this wide cave. The black light flashed, and the frightened ghost dragon directly spit out the breath of death, madly spraying towards the flying insects. As said before, bone-white flies are weak, not to mention Nefarian's death breath. Even Su-mu's slightly shaken death breath could easily shake these flying insects to death, but there are too many flies. Pieces of flying insects were killed by the attacks of Nefarian and Su-mu, and fell towards the depths of the cave. But at the same time, more flying insects gushed out from the holes and continued pounce on them. It seems endless. Su-mu could not feel their emotions, not even their breath of life. It's as if these bone-white flying insects are not some kind of creature, but a kind of material, a kind of mineral. Wonderful presence. Sumu sighed uncontrollably. He kind of understands why Caesar's empire defines these bone-white flying insects as unknown. A single bone-white flying insect is very weak, and any professional can easily kill it. But when the number of these bone-white flying insects reaches millions, tens of millions, and hundreds of millions, it is a legendary hero who will feel the scalp tingling in the face of these terrifying insects. But that alone is not enough. Silently feeling the futile gnawing of those bone-white flying insects, Sumu waved to Nefarian. Nefarian, come, let's go to the depths of the cave to watch TV. Subsequently, the billowing demonic energy erupted, wrapping around Suma's side, wrapping himself and Nefali safely in it. This demonic energy not only contained Suma's aura of death and darkness, but also contained the unknown energy generated by the invasion talent. When this demonic energy unfolded, no matter how many bone-white flying insects were, it would be difficult for them to rush in front of them. As soon as they entered the range shrouded in demonic energy, these bone-white flying insects would be corroded to death, ignoring the large or small openings on the mountain wall that were still spewing flying insects. Sumu directly took Nefarian and jumped down from the opening, heading towards the bottom of the cave, a height of hundreds of meters. When they reached the bottom of the cave, the scene is even more infiltrating. They fell into the sea. The bottom of the cave is about several hundred meters in radius. But when they fell, it wasn't the ground. It wasn't a rock. It was a sea. A sea of insects that is completely composed of bone-white flying insects, is constantly rolling and flowing, and occasionally flips up a few sprays. This is not the bottom of the cave, just the sea level made of bugs. When they fell from the sky, the depth of this sea, even Nefarian's huge body was submerged in it. Sumu is falling, and Nefarian continues to sink. Their arrival seems to have angered this sea, and the entire sea of unknown depth surged up, forming huge waves, as if they were going to be completely swallowed up. Pound, tingling scalp, feeling the countless tiny bodies flowing and gnawing outside his armor, making a dense and harsh sound. Sumu couldn't help cursing. He hurriedly wrapped himself and Nefarian with a billowing demonic energy, and started the phase shift again. The turbulent sea of insects collapsed suddenly. When the sea, which was completely composed of flying insects, was restored, Sumu and Nefarian had already rushed to the only relatively spacious passage at the bottom of the cave. Here too, there are bugs. Still, a lot less than outside. Judging from the color of these bugs, Sumu clearly felt that the bugs in this passage were much stronger than those outside, but they are afraid of quantity. As long as they don't let them see the sea that is really like the ocean again, they can kill a few stronger insects at will. Continuing to wrap his body and Nefarian's body with billowing demonic energy, Sumu walked Nefarian towards the depths of the passage. There are constantly worms pouring out of the passage, and they are constantly killed by the billowing demonic energy. The way forward, stepping on the corpses of countless bugs, Sumu and Nefarian continued to descend along the sloping passage, as if going deep into the center of the earth. The deeper you go underground, the fewer the bugs, but correspondingly, the individual strength of the insect is also stronger. Later, Sumu even saw a few bone-white flying insects the size of grapes, and these bone-white flying insects can even cross the diffuse exhaust gas, and will not be eroded and corrupted until they fly to their side. Walk thousands of meters along the sloping passage. When the flying insects flying out of the holes around the passage swelled to the size of walnuts, they finally reached the end of the passage. This is another cave. Looking away, the ground, the rock walls, and the top of the cave were full of flying insects the size of a baby's fist, densely packed, leaving no gaps. And in the middle of this cave, surrounded by the countless flying insects, was an insect king, the size of an adult's fist. Unlike the flying insects around, the color of this insect king is not bone white, but like the best jade, exuding a warm luster. This is not the most important thing. The most important is, in this insect king, Sumu clearly felt a powerful aura no less than that of Agnes and Carola, the pinnacle of epic rank. This insect king is only the size of an adult's fist, and is as delicate as a work of art, carved from the best white jade. Is this unknown? With a thought, Sumu appeared in the center of the cave. His hand covered with the gauntlet has already stretched out, grabbing towards this crystal-clear insect king. When outside the cave, just showing up angered the sea of insects. More so now, when Sumu grabbed the insect king with one of his hands, there seemed to be a very slight soul fluctuation spreading out, and the countless flying insects the size of babies' fists turned into white lights, at a speed that was indistinguishable to the naked eye, appeared on Sumu and Nefarian. Not just flying insects, even the insect king himself stretched out a pair of diamond-like claws, and devoured Sumu fiercely. A soft sound, The insect king failed to bite off his gauntlet, but Sumu clearly saw a small gap appeared on his gauntlet. The insect king, boss of the epic rank, smashed his hand that was comparable to legendary equipment. This time, Sumu was really surprised. It's just the pinnacle of the epic rank. This insect king can crush legendary equipment if it enters the legendary rank. Wouldn't it be able to crunch even equipment of the quality of the holy artifact? Not only that, at the same time that Sumu caught the insect king, the countless flying insects the size of babies' fists also seemed to ignore the influence of demonic energy and attached to Sumu and Nefarian. The dense and terrifying gnawing sound resounded again. Sumu clearly felt that under the repeated bites, there were traces of undetectable cracks on his armor. Sumu, leave quickly. These bugs are horrible. If you stay any longer, the dragon will die. Sumu was just shocked, and Nefarian was just panicking. In this narrow passage and hole, this powerful ghost dragon could not be used at all. It can't rise into the air, can't breathe out, can't even cast its skills. He could only twist and slap in vain, trying to use the flying insects from his body. The most frightening thing is, its incomparably powerful skeleton body, under the gnawing of countless flying insects, actually began to appear small gaps. Leave, will not leave. Having caught the bug king, Sumu naturally couldn't let go. 483. He had seen the terrifying value that this worm king represented, but if he continued to stay, not only Nefarian, but also himself, could not bear the gnawing of countless flying insects. Think about it, let the countless flying insects devour his armor, and let the insect king constantly tear his hand armor apart. Sumu resolutely activated his talent, erosion. Unknown energy poured out. It poured into the insect king's body at an extremely fast speed, and began to erode and transform the insect king. As if feeling the threat posed by this unknown energy, the insect king struggled frantically, and those flying insects the size of babies' fists even accelerated their gnawing speed, completely disregarding the constant wear and tear of his chelating teeth. In this time and again, it was as if the insect king's order was the only meaning of their existence. But now that Sumu has been caught, and since the transformation of eroded talent has begun, it is naturally difficult for this insect king to turn over. Even the undead boss of Mist, who has a huge body and has stepped into the pinnacle of the legendary rank, Sumu enslaved him in just a few minutes. Not to mention the mere worm king in his hand. Soon, unknown energy occupied the body of the insect king and poured into its head. Picture after picture began to appear in front of Sumu's eyes. This is the life of this insect king. The passage of time cannot be felt in the picture, but it clearly shows the growth trajectory of the insect king original. This bug king is just an ordinary bug, like the countless ordinary bugs in the game world. They lived in this cave and survived by eating some simple inorganic substances. Just one day, the worm accidentally ate a piece of or containing strange energy, and the worm began to mutate. By devouring bone, it can continuously split out smaller bugs from its body, helping it hunt and grow. The more bone it devours, the more tiny, flying insects it can divide, and it can grow faster. And these tiny flying insects that were split out were not separate individuals, but like the clones of this bug. The main consciousness of this insect is the leader of all the tiny flying insects original. This cave is not empty, but a large number of beasts and beasts of other races survive. When the worm completely devoured the ore, it also completely mutated, and a terrible race called Ominous was born. This race is the bone-white tiny flying insects that Sumu saw, bone-eating demon worms. And this mutant bug has become the king of the bone-eating devil, the bone-eating devil king. This is just the beginning. The newly born bone erosion insect king is only comparable to an advanced monster. Those tiny flying insects that it splits out, except for a few that can reach the basic level of bite force, the rest are ordinary insects. But there are many beasts and beasts living in the cave on the bone-eating insect king town. Countless tiny flying insects flew out and devoured all the bones of a beast in a very short period of time. The number of flying insects is more, and the level of the bone-eating demon insect king also increases. When the bone-eating insect king devoured all the beasts in the cave, the most powerful race in the cave, a group of powerful lava monitor lizards, became its target. Lava monitor lizard, the monster race of the lord rank. As long as you are an adult, you have the strength of a lord, and the leader is an epic monster boss. Such a powerful monster group, even a legendary hero would not dare to provoke it easily. The bone erosion insect king is different. It doesn't need to appear. It only needs to continue to hide in the ground, constantly splitting out countless tiny flying insects, constantly gushing out from various channels, attacking the lava monitor again and again, and swallowing the bones of the lava monitor again and again. Finally, when the epic lava monitor lizard king was drilled into the body by more and more tiny, flying insects and devoured all the bones in his body. The bone-eating demon king also advanced and stepped into the epic stage. From this rank, the bone-eating demon king is invincible. It is still hiding in the ground, but the countless flying insects that it split out left the cave along the passages and entered the Tian Crack Canyon. And with this crack canyon as the center, it spreads almost endlessly around. All creatures have become the targets of the bone eaves jar. All the bones have become the nutrients for the growth of the bone-eating demon insect population, and the upgrade of the bone-eating demon insect king's rank. When all the creatures within a radius of hundreds of kilometers, beasts, or other races, were swallowed up, the bone-eater demon king stepped into the legendary rank. It was at this time that the people of the Caesar Empire discovered the abnormality of this mountain range. Next, it is a war between a huge empire, and a legendary rank-ranked bone-eating demon king. Ordinary professionals are useless in this war. Only the casters above the heroic rank can cause effective damage to these monsters, which are too large to be counted, and can kill these monsters on a large scale. Yes, after devouring countless creatures and bones, the bone-eating demon worm is evolving. Their attack method is very simple, just addicted to phagocytosis. But after the bone-eating insect king stepped into the legendary rank, the tiny flying insects it split out had the most basic physical and magical defense capabilities of black iron equipment, and their fangs could be easily crushed. Black iron gear, dark iron, bronze, silver, gold, dark gold, epic, legendary. These 7 qualities also correspond to the 7 ranks among the bone-eating demon worms. The bone-eating demon worm is undoubtedly the pinnacle of this terrifying race. Even though his wings have been sharpened, with the instinct of the legendary rank, the bone-eating insect king can still fly slowly. Standing at the apex of this race, it can not only easily crush legendary equipment, but also withstand the physical and magical attacks of the legendary rank. The epic level monsters it split out can easily smash epic quality equipment while retaining the ability to fly, and withstand the damage of epic level physical and magic attacks, and so on. Caesar's empire is very powerful. When this unknown race was discovered, more than 10 legendary heroes and hundreds of epic heroes were mobilized for the first time to carry out continuous coverage strikes on this mountain range. Even so, they also lost 2 legendary heroes. Starting from the mountains with a range of hundreds of kilometers, a little bit of clearing, a little bit of approximation, and finally found the ominous source of Tiancrack Canyon got here. Caesar's empire could no longer advance, because there are too many insect seas hidden in the caves inside the canyon. No one knows how long this unknown race of Bone Eater has been born. No one knows how far the Bone Eater King has evolved. The only thing they can be sure of is, when a legendary hero full of shields was protecting a legendary mage, who had opened the shield into the cave to explore, they only said a word, and then there was no sound. That sentence is, "Don't come in unknown, blockade, doomsday." Finally, when Caesar VII ascended the throne, he personally took over Skysplit Canyon. After getting the detailed report given by the Mage Corps, he resolutely endured countless pressures, spent countless manpower, material and financial resources to build this Skycrack fortress, and firmly blocked the Skycrack Canyon with a rune array. This mountain range contains a strange power that can effectively prevent the gnawing of demon insects. With the establishment of the rune array, not a single flying insect can leave the Skysplit Canyon. In the first few years, the bone-eating insects will continue to impact the rune array. Slowly, the spellcasters stationed in the Skysplit Fortress found that the bone-eating worms were weakening, perhaps because of the loss of bone and nutritional supplements, or because of the original suppression of the Tiantia Mountains. The number of bone-eating demon insects is getting smaller and smaller, and the attack and defense power are getting weaker and weaker. After more than 10 years in a row, there was no longer a bone-eating worm in the Skycrack Canyon seam. This ominous race was really blocked in this crack canyon by this crack mountain range and the rune array, and there was no chance of it coming out until the arrival of Sumu and Nefarian. After reading all the memories of the bone-eating insect king, Sumu couldn't help taking a deep breath. Have to say, the bone eater is eligible to be called unknown. The most terrifying thing about this race is not its attack and defense power, but its nearly unlimited division ability and evolution ability. The information obtained from the bone-eating demon king shows that it is indeed because of the gradual weakening of the seal for more than 10 years that this insect king has fallen from the legendary stage to the peak of the epic stage. Even the bone-eating demon insects the size of baby fists in the cave have also changed from the original epic stage fell to the lord rank only. They still retain the terrifying gnawing ability they once had in the epic rank. It can be said, if it weren't for the decisiveness of the Caesar Empire at the beginning, it would have paid enough attention. When the bone-eating demon king really took the bone-eating demon to leave this crack canyon, leave this crack mountain range, and spread out on the Anduin continent, this main material world will really come to an end, devouring all living beings within a range of hundreds of kilometers. The rank of the bone-eating insect king reached the legendary rank. What if the bone-eater devoured a kingdom? When the rank of the bone-eating insect king is advanced again, when it can split the bone-eating insect of the legendary rank, and even the legendary hero can easily shred and devour it. I am afraid there is nothing in this world that can stop the devouring of these worms. Not only that, as one of the most wonderful races Sumu has ever seen, the bone-eater is not only the natural enemy of all living beings, but also the undead, or rather, the natural enemy of the skeleton family. Holy light is also the natural enemy of the undead, but this is because the light power represented by holy light and the dark power represented by the breath of death and darkness are two extremes. It's not wrong to say that the undead are the light natural enemies, as long as this undead is strong enough. And what about the bone-eater? They become the natural enemies of the skeleton family because of their bones. The significance of bone to the bone-eating worm is equivalent to the significance of experience points to the player. Moreover, this group of bone-white flying insects is born with a strong restraint effect on bone, such as Sumu. If the layer of armor he was wearing was a true legendary rank armor, other than the bone-eating demon insect king, who was the insect king, other bone-eating demon insects would definitely be difficult to destroy, but it is precisely because of the effect of the bone-eating insect on bone restraint, and because the armor on Suma's body is condensed from the essence of his bones, not only the bone-eating insect king can easily crush it, but even those from the epic rank, the bone-eating worms that fell to the Lord's rank under the continuous gnawing, can also continuously destroy them. So did Nefarian so? The bone-eating demon insect is the real enemy of the skeleton clan. Fortunately, the Caesar Empire acted early and decisively enough. After losing the replenishment of bone for more than 10 consecutive years, not only the bone-eating insect king has fallen from the legendary rank to the peak of the epic rank, but even the many epic ranked bone-eating worms have fallen to the Lord rank otherwise. With Suma's current strength and the restraint of the bone-eater insects on the skeleton, although he can start the phase shift and leave at any time, it is unrealistic to want to capture and enslave the bone-eater insect king like now. Ding! You have gained control of the bone-eating insect king. You enslaved the bone-eating demon king. You can rename the bone-eating insect king. The unknown energy mixed with the breath of death and darkness kept pouring in, until everything of the bone-eating demon king was eroded. When the crisp system prompt sounded in Suma's mind, the bone-eating demon insect king and his hand stopped struggling. In the entire cave, the countless fist-sized flying insects that were still eating Sumu and Nefarian fell to the ground as if they were dead at this moment. Nefarian was still terrified. When the flying insects that kept gnawing at its bones fell, the frightened ghost dragon returned to the passage from the cave at the first time. Although there are still flying insects in the passage, and there are still a lot of them, but at least those flying insects won't be able to gnaw and move its bones like these, bringing it a great sense of crisis and fear. Of course, Nefarian didn't realize that, when Sumu successfully enslaved the bone-eating insect king, not only the flying insects in this cave fell to the ground, but also the passages, the rock walls, and even the insects they once fell into. In the sea, all the flying insects stopped at this moment, as if they were dead, motionless. At this time, Sumu didn't have the mind to pay attention to this. All his mind, they are all invested in the transformation of the bone-eating demon king. As mentioned earlier, the bone-eater is a wonderful species. They are between living things and minerals. Even the bone-eating insect king, who once reached the legendary rank, only has simple wisdom and the most elementary wisdom. It is precisely because of this wonderful race that Sumu succeeded in enslaving the bone-eating demon king, but just a bug king at the pinnacle of epic rank. Sumu doesn't need to bother. Even the legendary insect king may not be seen by him. What he wanted was not the insect king, who was transformed into an undead in front of him. What he wants, after being transformed into an undead, he still maintains the ability to divide infinitely, and can evolve continuously by swallowing bones. Instead of a single epic rank peak insect king, the surging waste gas in the body rolled frantically, pouring into the body of the bone-eating demon king. With the knowledge he got from Argus and the information he got from the Skull Notebook, Sumu tried his best to transform this insect king. The influx of demonic energy seemed to be endless. However, the body of the bone erosion insect king, which is only the size of an adult's fist, seems to be a bottomless pit, and it will never be filled. Slowly, when Sumu began to use the breath of death and darkness stored in the source of darkness, the bone-eating demon king finally began to change. Lying quietly in Suma's hands, the bone-eating insect king is really like a work of art, carved from the best white jade, crystal clear, translucent, and exudes a soft light at this time. With the influx of countless demons, a thin, bone-white line quietly emerged from the tail end of the bone-eating demon Insect King, and slowly crawled towards its head through the Insect King's back. A little bit a trace. When Sumu instilled the magic energy into the Insect King's body, it was enough to transform a legendary undead. That bone-white thin line finally ran through the Insect King's entire body. This bone-white thin line did not destroy the beauty of the Insect King. On the contrary, because of the appearance of this thin white line of bone, the Insect King, who was originally like a dead thing, became a little more agile, like a living jade carving. Next moment, the Insect King's small eyes opened. Sumu also clearly felt a tiny wave of soul ripple in his mind. This is the emotion of the Bug King Immature Soft. Full of admiration and closeness to him. It worked. A smile appeared on Suma's face. The aura of death and darkness in his body was almost exhausted, and most of the aura of death and darkness stored in the source of darkness was also consumed. He finally succeeded in transforming this Insect King. Not only has it transformed from a half-living, half-mineral state to a half-undead, half-mineral state, but it also retains the most powerful bone-eating Insect King's most powerful infinite division and terrifying ability to devour bone evolution. With a smile on his face, Sumu looked at the Insect King in his hand. This king, show your abilities. Crack. A small and crisp sound resounded from the Insect King's abdomen, like a frog croaking. With this small but unceasingly spreading strange cry, on the ground of the cave, the countless flying insects that fell to the ground when Sumu enslaved the Insect King began to change. A trace of white thread was linked from the countless flying insects to the Insect King's body. The aura emanating from the bone-eating Insect King began to intensify at an extremely fast speed, and the countless flying insects the size of babies' fists quickly dimmed, and finally shattered and dissipated, turning into a fine layer of white powder. Not just here. In the passage, on the mountain wall, in the insect sea, and on the rock top, all the insects that Sumu and Nefarian had encountered, all exuded a white thread that linked to the Insect King, and then turned into powder. It seems they were split from the Insect King. When the Insect King was enslaved by Sumu and turned into an undead, they fed back all the bone essence in their bodies to the Insect King. Maybe a minute or maybe 10 minutes. When all the white thin lines disappear, there will be no bone-eating demon in the entire cave except the Insect King and the Bug King. Its body swelled from the size of an adult's fist to the size of 2 adults' fists. Zero asked for flowers its rank. It also climbed from the peak of the epic stage to the legendary stage again. After doing all this, the Insect King jumped lightly and appeared on Suma's shoulders from his hands. 2 white jade-like tentacles gave a slight gift on Suma's body. The Insect King just lay on Suma's shoulders, motionless, as if it were a new decoration in the channel. After watching the whole process from start to finish, Nefarian was not calm. Although the Insect King did not emit the slightest breath, it was like a real decoration of dead objects, but Nefarian did not dare to look at it this way before advanced. The Insect King and the multitude of flying insects gave Nefarian a mere threat. As long as it leaves this cave, as long as it returns to the ground, it has countless means to expel the flying insects on its body and kill these terrifying insects. But now, Nefarian could clearly feel the sense of crisis this Insect King brought him. That is, if you let go and kill yourself, you may not be the opponent of this little worm, who has just advanced to the legend. Maybe he will not die, but disappear completely, but being swallowed up, he will change from a tall and mighty ghost dragon to a disabled dragon with mutilated limbs. It is very possible. Codes. There are more and more strong people around the little skeleton. He couldn't help but cursed in his heart, and Nefarian, who was a little terrified, suddenly thought of Agnes was enslaved by Sumu, and advanced from a death knight to a fear knight. Carola was enslaved by Sumu, not only became Princess Mononoke, but also held the power of the City of Bones. Now this little bug is also being enslaved by Sumu. Sumu was enslaved. Not only did his strength not decline, but he became a legend seem. Only after being enslaved can you truly enter the circle of small skeletons. Every step of Suma's growth was watched by Nefarian. From the very beginning of the Lord rank to being qualified to be on an equal footing with oneself, and then to being above oneself, finally, until now, a bug around him is qualified to bring him a great crisis. If you also join the inner circle of the little skeleton, you shouldn't have to worry about the threat of this bug, right? The undead in the inner circle will not kill each other. With the constraints of the small skeleton, even if the worm grows again, and grows enough to devour him, he doesn't have to be afraid anymore. No, no, no. I am the noble Gelong Lord. How can you think of being enslaved by a small skeleton on your own initiative? As soon as this idea came to mind, it was decisively rejected by Nefarian. Its gaze shifted from Suma's body to the bone-eating demon insect king, and then back to Suma's body from the insect king's body. The thought that had just emerged seemed to have taken root in its mind, and it became clearer and clearer. At this time, Sumu naturally did not know, the ghost dragon, who was originally known for his pride and tyranny, felt the threat from the insect king, and even had the idea of voluntarily surrendering. His attention was still focused on the insect king infinite division, infinite devouring. This bug king really has the potential to devour the entire world, foreseeable, even if he steps into the legendary rank, is promoted to the sanctuary, or even grows into the strongest boss in history in his dreams. The insect king will never be outdated, and will always be one of the strongest combat powers under his command. So, one after another thoughts about the future came to mind, and a smile appeared on Suma's face. Your name is gluttony. The 7 deadly sins of gluttony. The 7 deadly sins refer to the 7 divisions of the original sins of human beings in the real world: arrogance, jealousy, rage, laziness, greed, gluttony and lust. Almost all human sins can be classified into these 7 original sins. 7 deadly sins. Gluttony. Just from this name, it's enough to see how big Suma's ambitions are in the future. See how high his expectations for the future of the bone-eating demon king are. To know, the 7 deadly sins not only represent the 7 original sins, but also represent the 7 demon kings circulating in the real world. Gluttony appeared. Are the other 6 original sins far behind? Still with that warm smile on his face, Sumu looked at the gluttonous insect king, who was not moving on his shoulders, turned and walked out of the passage. Nefarian did not know what the 7 deadly sins were. With a look of, although I don't understand it, it always feels amazing, he hurriedly followed behind Sumu and walked outside. Skybreak Fortress. Eiffel still stared at the pitch-black hole in the sky-crack canyon, as if facing a great enemy beside him. Around him, almost all the professionals and spellcasters stationed in Skybreaker Fortress took action, not caring about cherishing the few remaining magic crystals. All the mage towers of the mage tower are in a state of overloaded energy storage, and the power of each rune magic circle that constitutes the rune array has also been adjusted to the maximum. Even the mini spellcasters on the city wall of the fortress, 487, kept silent, ready to activate spells at any time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. When half an hour passed, the impatient Eiffel couldn't help it. He knew that the unknown seal in the Skycrack Canyon was the bone-eating demon, and he knew the terrifying number of this unknown species, and he knew even more how crazy and terrifying they were in the face of bones. There was no movement for half an hour. Did the Bone Eater devour the Bone King and the Ghost Dragon, or did the Bone King and the Ghost Dragon kill the Bone Eater King? It's all dead together. But it's just fantasy. Everyone knows that it is a coincidence that such a scene of perishing together is a small chance, but whether it is the destruction of the bone-eating demon worm or the destruction of the King of Bones and the Ghost Dragon, it is always good news. At least, Anduin continent only needs to face a natural disaster in the future, instead of facing 2 terrible natural disasters at the same time. Time goes on. Without Eiffel's order, those professionals and spellcasters continued to maintain a state of being ready to attack at any time, and even the beads of sweat fell from their faces, and they didn't dare to wipe them off slowly. When Eiffel really began to suspect that the 2 would perish together, a huge black shadow appeared over the sky-split fortress. Ghost Dragon. Nefarian. Seeing that huge figure, seeing another black figure on top of that huge figure, Eiffel's heart was extremely bitter. The King of Bones has finally won. The King of Bones and the Ghost Dragon walked out of the Sky-Crack Canyon unscathed, which undoubtedly showed that they had killed the Bone-Eating Demon clan, and completely ruled out this unknown species that they had guarded and sealed for more than 10 years. For them, this is good news, because this means that they don't have to guard here year after year, day after day, and worry all day long, for fear that the bone-eating worms in the canyon will rush out and become the 2nd largest natural disaster. The Bone Eavesdropper is no more. Their mission is accomplished, but even the bone-eating worms, which are extremely restrained by the skeleton family, were eliminated by the King of Skeletons, which further illustrates the terrifyingness of this terrifying undead. Even the unknown species of Bone Eater is difficult to fight against the King of Bones. What other existence in the entire Anduin continent can fight against the King of Bones? What other existence can free this world from the shadow of the undead? As for the others, Eiffel was too late to think about it. Wherever the King of Bones goes, there must be death and perdition. Even in the battle with all the strength of the Empire, the King of Bones has not been treated by these professionals and spellcasters in the Sky-Split Fortress, and it is even more difficult to hurt the King of Bones. It can almost be said, when the King of Bones reappeared, the fate of Skysplit Fortress, and their guardians stationed in Skysplit Fortress was doomed. Of course, that doesn't mean they can't resist. Their mission has been accomplished. Even if the next face is the King of Skeletons, they have to fight. Even if they know they are defeated, they will die here vigorously. Instead of moaning and doing nothing, you are ready. With a command, Eiffel stared at the huge figure in the sky, ready to attack the other side. When he started the phase shift with Nefarian and the gluttonous Insect King, and directly crossed the rune array, and appeared in the sky of the Skysplit Fortress, Sumu didn't do anything, but looked at the gluttony Insect King on his shoulders. Go, let this king see your abilities. Also let this king see if you are qualified to grow into a gluttonous demon king, who devours the world. Crack, as if he understood Sumu's words. The jade-like gluttonous Insect King moved. It made a chirping sound. The white jade-like body turned into a stream of light, rushing towards the Tiantia fortress on the ground. After consuming such a huge aura of death and darkness, Sumu naturally not only transformed the bone-eating Insect King into a gluttonous Insect King, but also greatly compensated for the shortcoming of the gluttonous Insect King being slow. At this time, the gluttonous Insect King was still unable to compare with Nefarian in speed, but with a high-speed outbreak in a short period of time, it is no longer a problem to meet the needs of the battle in the fortress. Eiffel, who was staring at the silhouettes of Nefarian and Sumu in the sky, was channeling his skills. His attack power is insufficient, but his defense power is unmatched. Even in the face of the King of Bones, he has the confidence to resist for a while at this time. He seemed to see a stream of light flying out from the King of Bones, flying towards the direction of the Skysplit Fortress. Immediately after, hiss, a small, crisp sound, that seemed to sound directly from Evrion's ears, instantly spread throughout the entire Skycrack Fortress. When this voice sounded, Eiffel's face changed in vain. This voice, he seems to be, when he followed Caesar VII's order to take over Skysplit Fortress, he seemed to have seen a detailed description of this voice from the top secret scroll of Skysplit Fortress, small crisp, like frogs croaking, but it rang directly in Evrion's ears. According to the description of the scroll, whenever this sound is heard, it is the time when the bone-eating demon king, and all the bone-eating demon insects attack. Could it be? A terrible thought came to Eiffel's mind. He stared straight ahead. The true appearance of the white streamer gradually came into his eyes. White jade-like body, slender body, two diamond-like fangs, and a pair of extremely short wings that have slut on the back. Unknown species. Bone eavesdrawler. Attack. Maximize power. Attack. It's the bone-eating insect king rushing out. Eiffel's eyes widened. He didn't have time to guide the powerful space spells, and a series of shields from more than a dozen space systems blessed himself, and several epic spellcasters around him. The supreme controller of the Skysplit Fortress was full of panic. The most disappointing result happened. The King of Bones is not dead. The bone-eating worm is not dead. Instead, Zero, the source of the bone-eating demon, the terrifying bone-eating demon king, has been controlled by the Bone King, and has become the help of the terrifying undead. One by one powerful spells rose into the air, smashing towards the white jade insect king, that was already approaching within 100 meters in the sky. But, regardless of whether it was an explosive fireball, a cyan wind blade, an extreme coldness, or a falling rockthorn, the insect king did not dodge or evade. Inside the crack fortress, legendary ranks. This rank gluttonous insect king not only possesses the terrifying attack power, enough to smash the legendary equipment, but also has the terrifying defense power, enough to resist the attack of the Juggernaut, and the magic bombardment of the legendary rank. These seemingly powerful spells are not even enough to leave a trace on it. Soon, the gluttonous insect king fell on a hero professional. Before the heroic professional could react, the gluttonous insect king opened his pair of claws, that were half the size of his body, as clear as diamonds, and bit the heroic professional's neck. Just a bite. The hero professional's neck was broken and fell to the ground. The gluttonous insect king got into the corpse of the hero professional at a very fast speed. Boom, boom, he's dead. Eiffel ordered frantically, and each spellcaster blasted out spells, one by one towards the fresh corpse, that was still twitching only. Next moment, the body of the hero professional, who just fell to the ground, collapsed. A lot of white mist emanated from the corpse of the heroic professional, with only one human skin left, splitting into thin mists like a trickle, spreading in all directions. That's not fog, not even a trickle, that's a bone-eating worm. It is a swarm of demonic insects, composed of countless bone-white flying insects only the size of mung bean. The speed of the bone-eating insect is no less than that of the gluttonous insect king, like fog, also like lightning. When the mist composed of these tiny bone-white flying insects spread out, the end of the Skysplit Fortress came. The bone-eating worm approached a professional, bit his skin, and burrowed into his body. In the shortest time, all the bones in his body were swallowed up, and more bone-eating demon insects were split and spread again. When the fortress of the day split did not block the approach of the gluttonous insect king, this result was already doomed. The gluttonous insect king will split infinitely from 5.5. After devouring enough bone, those tiny worms that have been split will split again, continue to look for the next target, continue to devour bone, and continue to split. Swords are useless because it can't be beat at all. Spells are useless because at the same time that a spell killed the great emperor's bone-eating demon worms, more bone-eating demon worms split out. This is a terrible exponential explosion. From the time when the gluttonous insect king devoured the bones of the first hero professional, in just 2 minutes, one by one professional and spellcaster fell to the ground, leaving only a bloody corpse one by one. And the white fog composed of countless bone-eating demon insects shrouded 1/5 of a sky-split fortress. 2 minutes, 1/5, 5 minutes, 1/2, 7 minutes. The gluttonous insect king is still missing. The insect swarm it split out has already enveloped the entire sky crack fortress. The countless dense swarms of insects fluttered in the fortress, chasing and devouring every living being. Looking down from the sky, it seems like a sudden heavy fog shrouded the entire Sky Split Fortress in it. Slowly, the number of creatures in Sky Split Fortress is getting smaller and smaller slowly. The bone-eating demon worms with Lord and Epic rank began to be born slowly. Sky Split Fortress fell silent. I am a sinner. In the Sky Crack Fortress, Eiffel opened the space shield and stared blankly at the bone white outside the shield except him. There are no other creatures in the Sky Split Fortress. Yes, it's just a piece of human skin wrapped in one's own equipment. Outside the shield, it was surrounded by layers of bone-eating worms. These bone-eating demon insects, big or small, with different ranks, are attached to the space shield, frantically opening and closing their fangs, gnawing at this tough shield. There are basic levels and advanced levels. There are Lord ranks and Epic ranks. The space shield is not an entity, and it is difficult to be torn apart by the bone-eating demon insects for a while, but with the gnawing of the countless bone-eating demon insects, the space shield fluctuated violently. Every moment, Eiffel needs to consume a lot of mana to maintain the shield, so that the space shield can exist. Eiffel knows. When the King of Skeletons brought the bone-eating demon king out of this crack canyon, there was no second possibility for this crack fortress but, watching his colleagues, his partners, and his subordinates being eaten up by a group of terrifying bugs still made him collapse. Instinctively maintaining the existence of the space shield 01, Eiffel kept chanting that sentence. I am a sinner, the sinners of the Empire. It is the sinner of the mainland. Time passed minute by minute. When Eiffel's magic power finally dried up, the tough space shield flickered and disappeared. Next moment, white fog pours in. In just 1 second, the influx of white mist dissipated again. And in situ, only a human skin, that lost its bones and flesh, swayed in the wind and fell to the ground. The last living being dies. The swarm that filled the entire Sky Split Fortress also lost its last target. Bone-eating demon insects can devour everything, but only bones, and bones can keep them dividing and evolving. Without bone, it would devour the entire world, and the bone-eating insects would still be the same as before. The swarm froze slightly, then sit on the ground. Countless white thin lines representing the essence of bone gathered together, and the figure of the gluttonous insect king gradually emerged from these thin lines. 1 is 10,000. 10, 000 is 1. The king of gluttony can be said to be the king of the bone-eater clan, or it can be said that the king of gluttony is the entire bone-eater. It can be divided freely, and it can be freely aggregated. When it splits apart, it is the sea of bone-eating worms that devours everything, and when it gathers together, it is the legendary gluttonous insect king. Those flying insects that fell and turned into powder are just dross in the bones. When the gluttonous insect king chooses to aggregate, the countless white thin lines representing the essence of bone are the nutrients that the gluttonous insect king needs to grow and advance continuously. After completing the task given by Father, the gluttonous insect king shook his short wings, and his figure rose into the sky, flying towards Sumu in the sky. What? A small and crisp sound resounded in the Sky Split Fortress again, only this time no one hears anymore. The gluttonous insect king. It seems a little scary. The bug king returns. After 2 slender tentacles rubbed Suma's body to express his affection towards Father, the gluttonous insect king continued on Suma's shoulders as accessories. Feeling the change of the gluttonous insect king, Sumu couldn't help but sigh. Devouring all the creatures and bones in the Tiancha fortress, the strength of the gluttonous insect king has probably increased by about 1/10. In other words, as long as 10 heavenly split fortresses are swallowed, the strength of the gluttonous insect king can be doubled. Sumu didn't know whether the gluttonous insect king needed an opportunity to advance from the legendary rank to the sanctuary. From the current point of view, from the first entry into the legend to the peak of the legendary rank, there is probably no bottleneck for the gluttonous insect king. All it needs is to devour, just bone perhaps. Wait until the gluttonous insect king grows to the pinnacle of the legendary rank. This little bug, which looks like a delicate work of art, is the strongest fighting force under Sumu. Subsequently, Sumu patted Nefarian on the head. The ghost dragon, who witnessed the whole process, was still in a state of trepidation. It understood, flapped its wings hastily, and flew towards the south with Sumu and the terrifying bug. The unknown in this cracked canyon has been subdued. Next, it is another clue. The Principality of Sar, located in the south of Anduin continent, subdued the gluttonous insect king. The idea of Sumu's advanced legend not only did not ease, but became more urgent. After all, the gluttonous insect-eating king under his command is already so terrifying. How can he, the king of skeletons, not be compared by his subordinates? By the way, on the way to the Principality of Sar, he still has to settle the task of this clue. The original bone-eating insect king was neither a legendary undead, nor a book of the dead. However, the gluttonous insect king brought to Sumu by that clue is far more valuable than a legendary undead, or even a book of the undead. With such a great deal, Sumu didn't mind settling that lead as if it were the real one even. He doesn't mind raising the rank of the quest reward by 1 level, and distributes the reward according to the treatment of finding the book of the undead. Anyway, he earned it all. With Nefarian's departure, Skybreaker Fortress became a veritable dead city. After half an hour, the teleportation array in the corner of the fortress suddenly lit up with a soft light. Immediately after, the figures of 3 legendary heroes and a dozen epic heroes gradually emerged from the teleportation formation and entered the fortress. This is reinforcements. It was an hour ago that Eiffel asked Augustine, who had become the emperor of the empire, for help. The reinforcements sent by the young emperor. An hour is indeed too late. Only Augustine himself was on the battlefield when Eiffel called. When the war ended, he reorganized his subordinates non-stop, and sent 3 legendary heroes and more than a dozen epic heroes to aid Tiantia Fortress in one go. That's all 490 he can come up with the powerful and unparalleled defensive capabilities of the Eiffel Space Enchantment Master, plus the 3 legendary heroes and a dozen epic heroes that followed. Should they be able to defend the Sky Split Fortress? Perhaps? Get out of the teleportation array. Legendary heroes who have just ended a war are mentally prepared to face the King of Bones only. They did not see the King of Bones, nor the ghost dragon Nefarian. I didn't even see the difficult resistance of the expected Zongshan Crack Fortress. Quite the opposite. There were no enemies, no battles, no voices, and no undead in the city after the King of Bones passed by. Of course, there is no one figure and no trace of vitality, as if this is a dead city that has been abandoned for countless years. Here, what happened? His eyes returned to the ground from the sky, and the pupils of a legendary hero shrank suddenly. He stepped on a thick layer of white powder on the ground, and rushed towards a place dozens of meters away. A distance of tens of meters, for a legendary hero, is just a blink of an eye. But just as he was about to reach that place, the legendary hero's body froze suddenly. Dare not to go any further. He saw clearly, it was a figure, but it wasn't what he imagined. It is a human skin that is still wrapped in a robe, lifelike, and can still see the horror and despair attached to a pile of goods from the face, looking around like crazy. In addition to the previous figure, the legendary hero found more figures, and saw many familiar faces only. Like that figure. Human skin. It's all human skin. No flesh, no bones, no guts. All the guardians in this cracked canyon seem to have been eaten up by a terrifying existence, leaving only a human skin. A chill rose from the bottom of my heart. Even legendary heroes and epic heroes can't help but start to fear when they see all this. If it is possible, they would rather face the King of Skeletons and die in a vigorous battle after they arrive, or see a city full of undead. Because of the 1-hour delay, they are also reluctant to face such a bizarre scene. Unknown, the King of Bones. As if thinking of something, a legendary hero shuddered violently. A trace of fear covered his face, and the legendary hero shouted in panic, "Quick, get out of here, it's unknown." The unknown broke the seal and came out. Panic. Less than 10 minutes after arriving at Tiantia Fortress, the heroes who were frightened by what they saw returned to the teleportation formation at the fastest speed and left here again. It is unknown that the Tiancrack Canyon has been closed down. It was the only explanation they could think of. Unknown, bone-eating demon worm, came out. Central Caesar's empire, in a fortress that had just been attacked. When the 3 legendary heroes returned from the Sky Split Fortress and reported all their knowledge in the Sky Split Fortress truthfully, Augustine in the fortress was slightly startled. Unknown, it is the bone-eating devil. As the new emperor of Caesar's empire, Augustine knew everything in the Skyrift Canyon well. Even when Caesar VII passed away, and became the emperor himself. He took over the burden of providing resources for the Sky-Split Fortress without the slightest hesitation, even in the most difficult times, because he knows very well what a terrifying species is sealed in the canyon. Imperial civil unrest, foreign invasion. He can indeed refuse for various reasons and leave it alone, but once the bone-eating worms break out of the town and develop and grow, it will still be the Caesar Empire and his people who will first bear this natural disaster. So, even if there is a shortage of magic crystals on his side, he will not lack the supply of magic crystals in the Sky-Split Fortress only. The bone-eating worm rushed out when he got the news reported by the three legendary heroes. Augustine was sure. The kind of situation where the entire fortress is eaten up, and all the creatures are left with only one blood skin. It must be caused by the bone-eating worms. It's not just the bone-eater and the King of Bones. After the first transmission of information, Eiffel also passed on several subsequent messages, informing Augustine that the King of Skeletons had brought the ghost dragon to the Skrak fortress and entered the Skrak canyon. Facing this kind of development, Eiffel could only think, the ending is whether the King of Bones destroys the Bone-Eater, or the Bone-Eater destroys the King of Bones. Augustine is different. The glory of the Empire came to an end because of the King of Bones, Emperor of the Empire, sacrificed for the King of Bones. Children of the Empire perished by the King of Bones. The territory of the Empire is also incomplete because of the King of Bones. After experiencing all kinds of things, this young emperor never used the worst results to guess everything the King of Bones did. He knew better than anyone how terrible the King of Bones was, and he believed better than anyone the power of the King of Bones. Bone-Eater, King of Bones, empty Sky-Split Fortress. When these three pieces of information kept circulating in his mind, Augustine had already thought of the worst result he could think of. The King of Bones conquered the bone-eating worms. The unknown, who has been locked down by the Empire, has become a new help for the King of Bones. If it is someone else, even a powerhouse at the pinnacle of the legendary rank, if he knew that the enemy he was going to face was an invincible skeleton king in the continent, and an unknown, enough to become the second natural disaster, the bone-eating demon race, at that time, I am afraid it would have collapsed long ago. Augustine is different. He always remembered the hatred the King of Bones brought to him. He is also trying his best to do everything possible to enhance his strength. This perseverance made this young emperor surpass the vast majority of existences on this continent. Only by blending into the darkness can we fight against the darkness. The words that once rang in my mind came up again. Sitting in the castle of the fortress, surrounded by many heroes, Augustine closed his eyes slightly. No one noticed that Augustine at this time. His pupils had been completely replaced by pitch black. That smear of darkness, like a deep pool, like an abyss, like the darkness of the world. After a long time, Augustine opened his eyes, and his pupils had returned to normal. It's just that the breath exuding from the body is slightly obscure. Order. A voice without a trace of emotion came from Augustine's mouth. 3 hours of rest. After 3 hours, reorganize the armament and continue to the next target. The Empire cannot be divided. I obey. After the many heroes left, Augustine slowly stood up and walked towards the dungeon of the castle. His pace was slow, but heavy. Every step I took, it was as if I wanted to merge my figure into the darkness. The dungeons of the castle of Mono house their captured enemies. There are mentor professionals, hero professionals, and epic heroes. These are all helpers recruited by the self-reliant great lords and great nobles. As the great lords and nobles were led by Augustine to quell the rebellion, these powerful professionals were also reduced to prisoners and imprisoned in dungeons, awaiting punishment. Of course, that's not the point. The point is, in this dungeon, with the lives of those captives, Augustine will begin his first steps into the darkness. He is very clear about the army. Taking this step, he will enter the darkness, and there will be no chance to return to the light. But he has no choice because this is the only hope he can think of, against the King of Bones or even destroying the King of Bones.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.